Hi everybody, I hope that you're all doing really well. So today we are really testing my ability to film, edit and upload videos, at least at a reasonably speedy rate, because I'm here to talk about books that I would quite like to read in October. I'm not going to lie to you, I'm not sure how possible this is going to be, or if this is just going to be a pile of possibilities as opposed to a strict TBR. But there's something about this time of year, especially on BookTube, where I just want to participate in all of the seasonal reads that are going around. I'm not typically a very seasonal reader, but you know, we've got in October Victober, it's also Halloween, so people are reading lots of spooky reads, and then in November we've got non-fiction November, and then December is Christmas time, and I just want in on that. Whether or not my motivation actually sustains me through those months, because I'm very much a mood reader, and if I'm not in the mood to read something, even if I have picked it out for myself in the past, I'm just not going to do it. But you know, in the spirit of October, in the spirit of Victober, in the spirit of Halloween, here are some books that it would be nice if I managed to get round to them this October. And also, let's be honest, Victober is just like a peer pressure sport on a booktube. But to be clear, it is one that I am gladly peer pressured into because I do love a little bit of Victorian literature. Or as you will see from my pile of books, Victorian inspired. If we are going for a book that is purely Victober though, the option that I have on my physical TBR is The Portrait of a Lady by Henry James. I previously only read The Turn of the Screw by Henry James before. And also, is it just me, or do you hear Henry James and think of Notting Hill? Just me? I actually know very, very little of this, and often when people are talking about the plots of these two books, I end up confusing it to Vanity Fair, and I don't know how much of that is that the most iconic cover of Vanity Fair, the penguin cloth-bound classic, that's the one that I think of first, is kind of similar to this. I've also heard some quite good things about this recently, so that has made me feel more keen to pick this up, but I really don't know anything about it apart from the fact that it is chunky, and it also has one of my favourite first lines in any book that I've not yet read. Under certain circumstances, there are few hours in life more agreeable than the hour dedicated to the ceremony known as afternoon tea. As a British tea drinker, I have to concur. Also recently I was watching Scott over at Gunpowder Fiction and Plot video on his favourite Victorian novels, and two books that really stood out to me from that list that I hadn't really considered much of until now was Silas Marner by George Eliot, as well as Jude the Obscure by Thomas Hardy. I've always thought that if I was going to read another Thomas Hardy, it would be The Mayor of Casterbridge, because that just sounds really funny, the whole premise. I previously hadn't known much about the plots of either Silas Marner or Jude the Obscure, but the way that he was talking about them made me think, oh, that could be quite interesting. Those could be some lovely books to pick up. Also, what Silas Marner has going for it is that it is short. That does always make books a little bit more tempting. But honestly, a lot of the more Victorian literature, even though they are famous titles, I am kind of going into a little bit blind, so I am very much willing to take on any and all suggestions of Victorian books that I should read. The rest of the books I have on my physical TBR pile that are like Victorian adjacent are very much like inspired. For example, one of those books is In Search of Anne Bronte by Nick Holland. This is one that I actually picked up at the Bronte parsonage, or actually no, it was in a shop that was near the Bronte parsonage, and it's one that I've heard so many people talking about when it comes to Anne Bronte, because I do think that Anne Bronte is very underrated. You know, as underrated as a Bronte can be. I absolutely love The Tenant of Wildfell Hall, and I love Agnes Grey, and so the fact that Anne doesn't get her due quite as much as Emily and Charlotte just bothers me a bit. I'd also read Take Courage, which was another like focused non-fiction on Anne Bronte's life, but I didn't really like that one very much, and when I mentioned that I didn't like that book very much, everybody mentioned that I should check out this, so I was really pleasantly surprised to find it. In terms of fiction, I also have Bronte's Mistress by Finola Austen. This one I did actually pick up at the Bronte parsonage, and you can tell because I got a little stamp in my book, so I'm never going to be able to get rid of this. This makes it a treasure in my collection. And yes, this is fiction focused mainly on Branwell Bronte and his married lover Lydia Robinson. And then the last book that I have that is solely focused on the Brontes is Glasstown by Isabel Greenberg. I bought this for myself for my birthday, and I've just been meaning to read it ever since. It is this beautiful graphic novel all about the early life of the Brontes, and particularly the magical world that they created. And just look at how beautiful it is. This is just one that I need to carve out time for reading. I think the main reason I've put off reading it is because it is a, you know, taller book. It's kind of hard to transport with. It's one that I think I'm just going to have to like sit down with a hot chocolate on a nice long weekend and just devour. The last kind of Victober inspired book that I would quite like to pick up is Why She Wrote. Very similarly to Glasstown, this is more of a graphic novel, though it does have a little bit more text in here. The incredible lives and hidden histories of 18 women writers from the 18th, 19th and early 20th century are brought to life in this compelling graphic collection. So this does dip in a a little bit before the Victorian period and a little bit after, but most of the novelists that are featured in here are Victorian. And we have these sections of the graphic novel recounting the lives of these extraordinary women writers, and then we do have little moments of text explaining more about the biographies of these women's lives. So I believe that we start off with Mary Wollstonecraft and then we end with Louisa May Alcott. This is another book that I picked up around the Bronte parsonage, but it was actually from a really gorgeous bookshop called Waves of Nostalgia. If you were ever in Haworth, I really highly recommend that you go there. It was actually recently featured in the Bookseller magazine as one of their like top bookshops. So very topical right now. And then, as I mentioned, you cannot do an October TBR without focusing on a few slightly more spooky or just generally darker books. And I'm not gonna lie to you, I kind of shot myself in the foot really with this because I already played my trump card. I read Dracula by Bram Stoker for the first time, but I read it in September. Like, what a fool. It's there as a recommendation for anybody who wants to read it. I mean, not only is it a spooky book, but it's also a Victober book. It was written in 1897, so it would have worked perfectly for Victober. But a book that I did talk about as a good transitional, slightly spooky, but mainly spooky because it's talking about death book in my end of the year book tag was Death by Shakespeare by Kathryn Harkup. Snake bites, stabbings and broken hearts, going through all of the different deaths in Shakespeare and what that means. Am I mentioning this as a spooky read mainly because it has a skull on the cover and is talking about death? Yes, pretty much. I know on BookTube there is usually some sort of Shakespeare related event in September, and I did kind of miss the boat on that, so this is a good chance to catch up. The last book that I have to talk to you about today is actually a new release that I picked up recently, and this might be the perfect book for me for October because it combines like kind of spooky, creepy vibes with Frankenstein and also romance. Not sure how that could be? Well, meet Angelika Frankenstein Makes Her Match by Sally Thorne. If you recognise the name Sally Thorne, she actually wrote The Hating Game, so this is a completely different venture for her. This is basically reimagining Frankenstein with Victor Frankenstein having a sister called Angelika, but they have this very kind of like modern influence relationship where they are kind of like bantering back and forth. Angelika is, I believe, 24 and unmarried, and she's kind of bitter about that, and she likes to accompany her brother as he raids the morgues and graveyards for different body parts. And I think what is going to happen in here is she decides to make her own boyfriend, make a boyfriend out of corpses and reanimate him, and I think that's basically the gist of it. And you know, it's not the kind of romance that I typically read, but I feel like Sally Thorne has some good credit with me. I love Frankenstein. I think this is just a really fun, silly premise. And so we'll see how we go. I think if nothing else, this is just going to be funny. So there we go. That is a little quick summary of books that I would quite like to read in October, but we will see how it goes. I would love to hear if you are planning on participating in Victober or if you are reading any Halloweeny spooky reads. Anything that you would recommend to me, I would love to hear from you. I hope you're having a fantastic, fantastic day, and I look forward to talking to you again soon. Thanks.